that was Slippery Stones, the second track off of the album. One thing that had never occurred to me about this track before is how much it reminds me of, especially with the more whimsical and sort of quirky sounding, very folky guitars. And there are probably much better examples I could use for sounds like this, and this is kind of a niche reference, but it reminds me a lot of a band I really love called Natural Snow Buildings, who are a French band who make very psychedelic, drony, atmospheric music. You never really know what you're going to get into. They have anything from like fairly atypical folk songs to 40-minute drone tracks. Like there's a huge range in what they do, but a lot of the sound world that I get from Slippery Stones reminds me of them so much. And it's not a connection I'd ever made before, but I just had an instant connection in my mind for that.
I think it's really cool. And one thing I really like, having heard about Yann Tiersen from his movie soundtracks, I think you come to expect a certain type of music.
Yes.
And what's really nice about this album or albums of his that are produced not for soundtracks, they're much more creative, and I think they incorporate some really interesting sounds. Already the last two songs, I think we've had a really interesting atmosphere built through a very creative process of using kind of different noises and instruments and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to see, because I think the soundtracks are mostly dominated by kind of orchestral kind of instruments.
Definitely.
And it's just super nice to see that creativity. And something that I'd just read up is that this album, in fact, unlike his other songs, was not written in French, but instead various different languages will show up throughout this album. So we have English, like we just heard. We have Faroese, which is from the Faroe Islands. We have Icelandic and Breton, which is a region within France, but I'm guessing it must obviously have its own kind of dialect and language.
Yeah.
And he seems to be a big proponent of kind of Breton culture over French culture, which I think is really interesting. There's many examples of this. I think perhaps you could even say in England with Cornwall, where Cornwall wanted to kind of have its own independence even from England, and kind of recognized its own culture. And in Spain we have the same with
Catalonia and wider Spain.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to see. And I have lots of things to say, but I don't want to make the breaks too long.
Yeah, okay. So we will go straight on to the next song, the third song in the album, A Midsummer Evening.